Here we go. Welcome to New Curriculum 30-minute bite-sized boosts, 6 recorded lunchtime sessions for K-6 teachers. My name is Cheryl Babin, and I'm a designer of professional learning at the Calgary Regional Consortium. Thank you for joining session number 3 today. I'd like to just take a moment to acknowledge that we are gathered here today in an important and sacred place within Treaty 7 and the traditional territories of the Niitsitapi from the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Siksika, Piikani, Kainai, and the Ihari Nakota of the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley Nations, and the Dene of the Tsuut'ina Nation. Southern Alberta is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. As participants gathered here in the heart of Treaty 7 territory, we acknowledge that we have an ongoing responsibility to protect and honor all of life within our shared reality in this special place. Today, I really want to link into First Peoples principles of learning that talk about learning involving patience and time. And so when we embrace an Indigenous way of knowing, and we think about how we can build a bridge from a student and where they're at to the target, we need to recognize that patience and time is so important to that component of the learning. And we don't always feel that patience and that the liberty of that time in our work in schools. And so it's something that we really have to put at the forefront of our approach and really continue to reinforce those ideas in our minds. And so today, in our 30-minute nutshell, we're going to talk about building that bridge from students to targets. And in 4 quick pieces, there's a link to the slides for you there, or a QR code if you prefer. But what we're going to talk about is, number 1, relationships first, always starting there and always maintaining the focus on building and structuring the relationships so that the culture and the conditions for learning really are truly there. We're going to talk about what it feels like to be lost at sea, and maybe also thinking about starting where students are, not where you want them to be. And then I have a couple of tools that I hope you will be able to stick in your back pocket that will support you in scaffolding learning for students along the way. A few months ago, I came across this stunning image. There's many beautiful images of Vietnam's Da Nang Golden Bridge. And it just really resonated with me as a wonderful, beautiful metaphor for how we might scaffold learning and support that bridge. We're looking at new curriculum where in some in some subjects, we have a change in outcomes that requires students to move from one spot to another, and that perhaps there won't be the background knowledge to be able to do that immediately. And then we also have learned over the last couple of years that normal spread of readiness and abilities in a classroom continues to grow throughout the changes that students have occurred in the last little while. And so for all of the students in our care, our hope is to really create that bridge and support them along the way so that we can pave the way, remove any barriers, and really allow them to be successful, but recognizing that it's going to take time and we don't have to shoot them over to the target right away, because those in-between steps are really important to their conceptual understanding. So again, this is called the Golden Bridge in Da Nang, Vietnam. I want to share with you a little video to start, and it's Dave Stewart Jr. And he has a series of videos, but this one is a strategy that I really think we can utilize when we think about how best to really make connections and make responsible, ongoing relationship choices that can create that culture of learning in our class. And this particular example is often used. It's called 2x10, and it's often used in response to students who are demonstrating challenging behaviors, which can come from students who are feeling like they're not meeting the outcomes, or they're not feeling comfortable with a particular skill or concept that you're working on. So let's just sit back for a few minutes and listen to Dave Stewart's his take on the 2x10 strategy and the benefits of it. And let's see if we can take some of those ideas and pull them into our own context. Here we go.
Hey there, colleague. How in the world are you doing? Hope that this day finds you well, and excited to talk about a real old school idea, a strategy that has been found to improve not just the behavior of individual students who are really struggling with behavior, but also the whole rest of the class. So Raymond Vlikodowski is the guy who in the 1980s researched something that he called 2x10. You've probably heard of it. It's very simple, kind of has legendary status to it. Here's all it is. For 2 minutes per day, for 10 straight days of class, you talk with the student who you're most concerned about from a behavior or an engagement or a motivation standpoint, the student who you're most concerned about something completely non-academic. That's it. For 2 minutes a day, 10 days straight, non-academic conversation with the student. So typically this is the type of thing that you can do at the beginning of class, very end of class. You can do it during an independent work portion. It's a lot like Moments of Genuine Connection, except it's a longer conversation. The Moments of Genuine Connection that I talk about are usually 30 to 60 seconds. This is 2 minutes long, and it's never academic. Moments of Genuine Connection should balance academic moments of genuine connection and personal moments, but for 2x10 you're going just personal. Something to keep in mind with 2x10, initially chances are the conversation is going to be very difficult. It's going to feel awkward, uncomfortable. You'll be getting a lot of monosyllabic responses from students as you're like, so tell me what types of things you like to do outside of school. I don't know. What types of movies do you watch? Movies. Don't be surprised if initially you have a hard time finding anything to latch onto. This is how I do it. I just take a little index card and I put 10 boxes on it. Okay, kind of like that. And normally I'll also put like the letters of the days of the week. So depending when I start will be which the first one is. So let's pretend that I'm starting on a Wednesday. All right, super basic. I'm going to put this up by my desk, and I know that it's for the one student who I'm trying 2x10 with this next 10 days. And so when I'm having that initial conversation, anything that I find that I can possibly try to keep a conversation going for 2 minutes about, I jot that down. Sometimes it might be Netflix, it might be drawing, it might be skating, it might be video games. I'm just giving myself a little bit of a cheat sheet because, I teach about 100 students per year. So when I'm trying to remember during third hour with Jimmy Johnson, okay, yeah, I got to do 2 minutes with him today. Let's talk about what he most recently watched on Netflix. Let me see if I can get him there. So expect difficulty and awkwardness and a stilted feeling to the conversation for that first 1 to 3 times. But every single time I've ever done this, typically you'll feel a momentum shift on the 4th or the 5th or the 6th time when the student kind of brightens up just a little bit, imperceptibly almost, to you approaching them, and they're eager to maybe initiate, oh, hey, Mr. Stewart, I watched this the other day, you should check it out, or just something like that. I think it's really important to emphasize, you're doing this with one student. Don't strap 50 students on your back that you're going to try to do this with. Pick one student, just go with your gut and try this, and then just see what happens. Obviously don't want to make this a super public conversation, but if you're kneeling down next to a student during independent work time and quietly talking, if that doesn't disrupt your class, then that's not always a bad thing, because I do think part of the power of 2x10 that Vlikodowski observed, and in 80% of the classes where he observed this, he found that there was an improved dynamic, not just in the student, but in the whole class. I think part of the power is that students are not dumb and they see these types of things. And for the student that you chose, probably the normal thing that teachers do with that student is ignore them or quickly give up on them, become frustrated. It's just like a natural human response to difficulty, and teachers have plenty of difficulty, so we typically don't go out of our way to consistently interact with someone who's making our job a little, these students are the students who are making our job a little tough. They're not doing it intentionally per se, but it's a lot easier to teach a motivated or cooperative student than it is one who's not. All right, just give it a try. Give it a try. Pick one student, make that index card, and go to town. And then share in the comments what you discovered. And hey, if you'd like more videos like this, just click subscribe, then you'll never miss a single one, will you? And also, for lots more simple interventions that help with student motivation and your job as a teacher, check out the links below. I've got tons of blog articles.
Okay, thank you. Dave's Creating Moments of Genuine Connection it has been captured in the Cult of Pedagogy. So I linked in a blog post there that you might like to check out. So I'm wondering if you can consider any versions of this. Now, obviously, he's a high school teacher, but wondering what kinds of connections you might be making to your own class or to the students that you teach, and how this might be relevant when trying to help make them follow along the bridge as toward the target. And so while you're considering those things, I'd like to invite you to imagine for a second being lost at sea. There it is. There's the ocean. And you're lost, but now you have one coordinate along that plane. We've got perhaps a line of longitude, and that's the one coordinate that the Coast Guard has to be able to find you. It's going to take a while to find you. Sigh. This is going to be a long day. So you have this whole sort of space to be able to search. Okay, but what if you had 2 points of reference? You know, 2 is definitely better if we're thinking about being lost at sea. Yes, because then we could have those coordinates making a cross point and targeting us in on a location. But wait a second, I wonder if both of those coordinates are accurate. Now, we know that when we are trying to place coordinates or gather information or assessment data around students, we know that we try to gather evidence from maybe one place. But let's just say that we're looking for a second component of diagnostic assessment, or trying to figure out where a student is not lost at sea. We need to also consider that sometimes our evidence might not be perfectly accurate. Like, what happens if maybe they were sick the day that you collected evidence on a reading score or their ability to multiply? Or worse, you know, they were uninvited to their friend's birthday party on the day that you captured the measurement, and then the entire assessment is irrelevant. So if we add in a third coordinate, we know that the Coast Guard can find us lost at sea, and as teachers, we have a pretty strong triangulated view of where our students are at. And so I hope you can see the metaphor that we've created about being lost at sea, and why we might want multiple sources of assessment evidence to be able to know where a student is. And when we're thinking about bringing them from where they are to a target, it's so important that we actually know where they're starting from. And so when we think about evidence of student learning, we want to try to draw from multiple sources, because none of us really want to just be judged on one test or one assessment. No, we'd rather be able to demonstrate all of the things that we know and can do in lots of different ways. And so you've likely seen this triangle before. Ann Davies, Damian Cooper, lots of different sources have written about this triangulation of assessment data. And you can be really mindful to include observations that you make during learning. So maybe they're performing something, maybe they are just talking in a group about the work, maybe they are working with manipulatives and they're creating groups of 10 so that they can start to sort things into learning about repeated addition. Or maybe they're manipulating letter cards and trying to represent the sounds that they make. And so observations that you make during those learning experiences count as assessment evidence. As well, we can definitely consider the products that students create. These are the most frequently used ones. So if there's an assessment test, and I know that all of you have been working hard with like the LENS and the CC3 to try to gather assessment evidence about students in your care if you're in the younger grades. And so there's lots of these ways that we do these diagnostic assessments, but I'm just trying to suggest that in addition to maybe one test or a couple of different tests, you might also incorporate observations and conversations with that student about the learning. Have them record an explanation, have them engage in conversations about feedback, see how they take the feedback that you give them, and if they maybe you'll give them some support on a writing example, and then they'll say, oh, I'd forgotten about that. And then they quickly add it in, revealing that they actually did know it and that they can apply it. It leaves you with an updated sense of where they are. And so when we're thinking about where students are, looking at that student evidence, it's important to know that written products are really valid and especially helpful when we're assessing knowledge. Listening to students in terms of their depth of understanding, it really revealed through conversations. And when we observe students as they perform tasks, it's really helpful for us to be able to assess competencies like problem solving and critical thinking, managing information. And while these are not listed specifically on the learner outcomes within the new curriculum, they are embedded and they are included in what we need to be able to teach explicitly and embed into the work that we are doing with students every day. So this is a nice model that can help to support that way of thinking and to remind us that different forms of assessments and learning experiences can really help to make our picture of assessment more robust. Author and assessment guru Dylan Wiliam reminds us that we need to start where students are, not where we'd like them to be. And I think this is especially true right now as we're all being challenged by many different factors at play. So just imagine that facing up that range of steps for that little person. Now I'd just like to think about this rope. And I feel like this is a conversation that we don't have often enough in classrooms. And I realize as I reflect on my own teaching career that it wasn't something that we talked about very often. And so I really feel it's important to bring this to the forefront in our work right now, as we're thinking about gaps in learning and hearing about learning loss and all of these sort of detrimental approaches to learning. And I'd rather talk about it from a place of a strengths-based approach and really thinking about what students can do. Now here's where the tension lies, and you can see the little phrase of that rope popping up there and being torn at. I wonder if you have times where you feel like you are meeting students where they are. I'm sure you do. And I wonder also if you have times where you feel like you're mindful and completely focused on the outcomes that are determined for your grade level or your subject area. And are they the same? Are you meeting students where they are because students are there? Or do you have students who maybe aren't quite there yet, but you feel that pull and that responsibility to teach the outcomes exactly as listed in your grade level? And so I just wanted to bring this metaphor to the forefront because I think that pulls at us at times and it makes us wonder, well, I'm responsible for doing this, it's my job, and yet the students are over here. So I want to reinforce to you that the right answer to this tension, to this pull, is always to meet students where they are, because without doing that, you're not able to actually get them to where they want to be or to move them forward on that continuum of learning. So always feel confident and sure in your own practice that when you're meeting students where they are, you're doing the right thing. So what do you do when you know where they are, now that you've triangulated that assessment data and you've captured all of it, but you have to try to move them forward on a particular skill or the development of a conceptual understanding? Well, I pulled an article for us. It's called 4 Strategies to Scaffold Complex but Essential Reading. Now, reading is one component of the many outcomes that we're working on right now, but it is so embedded in all of the subjects and all of the disciplines. And truly, the strategies that they outline in this could really be applied to a math context, to a physical education and wellness, to those of you that are working through social studies content or piloting new science. It really transcends all of those areas. The article is linked to the picture and also in the speaker notes of the slide deck. But I would also like to let you know that the key 4 strategies are: don't jump in, slow down and set it up. Sometimes we'll quickly say, all right, everyone, I'd like you to read this passage or this book or this page from a book or however it might be. And what we need to do is to just really slow it down and set up the task, what's expected, teach unfamiliar words and concepts before they have to try to encounter them within that text. The research tells us that if a student does not know a word to hear it orally, they won't be able to decode it with any success through the course of their reading. So it's really important to unpack those and make that learning visible. You want to guide students through essential texts in class together. So if there's a certain component of material that you really want everyone to know, it's important that you facilitate that and offer that as an option. Maybe there are 3 ways that you can engage in reading a certain piece together. I would suggest that you could say, all right, in the next 15 minutes, I would like everyone to read this paragraph, but I would like to offer you some choices. You can read it independently, either finding a spot in the space that works for you, or you can read it with a buddy, elbow to elbow, where you can take turns reading or paired read that together. Or the third choice is you can come and meet me over in our meeting space, and we will read through that together. And that slight little angle on differentiation gives students the agency to choose what approach works best for them, while also making sure that you can scaffold the complexity for students who might really need that. That idea leads directly into strategy number 4, which is use small groups strategically. And so whether you're planning literacy centers or math groups or stations or whatever you like to call them in your setting, when we think about scaffolding and complexity, you can sometimes use those groupings to help build up the background knowledge and support the identifying of next steps that you really need to inform your practice. So I hope you enjoy that quick article. It's a nice, easy read. And these strategies are things that we know, and I know that you know them. And I just thought that it would help us to remember, and really, as we get so busy and pulling all of these things together all the time, it's nice to have that memory of, or that reminder of things that we already know. Now I'd like to introduce for you a learning continuum. And this tool comes from Shelley Moore, one of our favorite supporters of inclusive education. And I wanted to just show you how, in a couple of examples, Shelley has designed a way of scaffolding grade level content in a model that allows for multiple entry points. And so, you know, the titles here, approaching, emerging, developing, confident, and extending, those can be anything that you use in your school context. But you'll notice that the 3 in the center speak to grade level expectations, or that, you know, that there's a range of achievement within a grade level. But then you're also going to have students that require extension and some who are not yet there. And so let me show you how. There's a blank one in there for you, but let me give you an example of what Shelley means when thinking about this. And this particular example, it's a grade 2, excuse me, a grade 2 sample about learning about water. Why is water important to living things? And so the red circle at the bottom is identifying that these are content pieces from the curriculum. And so I know the difference between land and water on Earth. That is a very accessible entry point for all of the students to be able to hit. And so these are not just entry points, but targets that can help students to move along that progression. If you've seen any of Shelley Moore's work, you'll know that she has a fabulous video called Dr. Baked Potato, where she talks about adding complexity to the student as they become ready for it. And so everyone starts with the plate, everyone gets here, and this is what we get to. And as we add the potato, you can do the baked potato toppings that can go onto that. I will leave this example for you to see. This spreading out of the skills or of ideas through that continuum connection can also be done with skills. And so you can see here how an approaching level of development could be, I know my 5 senses and I know how to use water. But at the extending other end of the continuum, we might get a student who is ready to evaluate their own personal use of water, which is quite a different expectation and outcome for a young learner. And you can see all of the stages in between. Now, these are, here's a literacy-based example of using text and how it's organized. But I understand that in the depth and the busyness of all that you're doing in the day to meet all your students' needs, going into this much depth and complexity when designing your learning can be challenging. So I would suggest that you use these examples as really a place to help get your head in terms of how you might scaffold and move them along the way. I've narrowed down that template to try to make it a little bit easier for you to just do jot notes that could connect to where a student is. Now, I've taken out the labels from the grade level outcomes because sometimes you might not be working specifically with grade level expectations and your students. So wherever they are, you want to start with them at that place, and then you're moving them toward the target. And if that target is behind grade level or perhaps in advance of that, that's okay. And that's the right answer. So in this model, it's the idea is that it's not the student, it's starting with the student's readiness and then adding in like rungs of the ladder or steps along Da Nang's Golden Bridge, and how you can add in some of the ideas that can create that complexity. And so at this point, as we wrap up for a very quick bite, I would invite any questions that you have or about building bridges for your students. Would anybody like to turn on your mics and share any questions or comments? I hope you enjoyed our session today. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to talking with you next week. Thank you so much for attending or watching on the recording. Take good care.